Hello, I am Ryan DeCorpo, co-coordinator of Pox Christi New York State, alongside my colleague, former National Council Chair and Ambassador of Peace, Isaac Chandler. We are joined by Frida Berrigan, the daughter of two recipients of Pox Christi's Teacher of Peace Award, Philip Berrigan and Elizabeth McAlister. Once a Josephite priest and Nobel Peace Prize nominee known for his public acts of civil disobedience against the Vietnam War, including his involvement in the May 1968 draft file burning by the Catonsville Nine, Philip Berrigan met art history instructor and former Sacred Heart of Mary sister Elizabeth McAlister in 1966. They were legally married in 1973, founded Jonah House resistance community that same year, and engaged in a variety of nonviolent protests over the following decades. Most recently, on the 50th anniversary of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Liz McAlister and 7 other activists protested nuclear weapons in southern Georgia as part of the Kings Bay Plowshares. The couple is the namesake of the new Berrigan-McAlister Award, presented annually by DePaul University to Christian peacemakers. Frida Berrigan, a columnist at Waging Nonviolence, is a writer whose work has appeared in Sojourners Magazine, Salon, Mother Jones, and Common Dreams. A co-founder of Witness Against Torture, she is the author of the 2015 book, It Runs in the Family, on being raised by radicals and growing into rebellious motherhood. Frida, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you both for having me. It's a privilege to talk to you both and meet you in this funny format.
Certainly is. You were raised at Jonah House, and you've described your upbringing thusly. Quote, "There were 10 adults and half that many kids, all living together in a tall, skinny row house with a tiny yard in the middle of Baltimore. Our food was bought in bulk or salvaged from dumpsters, and always shared with hundreds of hungry neighbors. The mice, cockroaches, and moths loved our abundant, haphazardly stored provisions." In this environment, when did you first become aware of your parents' fame and notoriety? And what was your understanding of the lifestyle choices they had made?
Right, great question. Thank you. I think my first inkling of particularly of my father's notoriety was, being in random places with him, like at the gas station, pumping gas. Time we made one of these little texts, somebody would come up to him and say, "Oh, you look familiar. I recognize you. You're Father Berrigan, and you destroyed my draft file, and I am some variation of I'm alive today because of the Catonsville Nine, and I didn't go to war. My number never came back up, and so I'm grateful to you," and that was very moving for my father. Okay, so maybe it didn't happen every time we left the house, but it happened enough for me to, even as a young kid, sort of note it and mark it and remember it. And Dad would receive that that sort of invitation for conversation, that gratitude, with a lot of humility, and a lot of like, well, yeah, I did my part. Like, that was the point. And I'm glad that that you have a life to live, and may you live it, to its very fullest, and live it without fear and without compromise. Some riff along those lines is what he tried to share with the men who were a generation younger than him, but of course to me seemed old too. So that was it was just so concrete, that kind of connection with people, that it wasn't just this kind of performance of politics or performance of opposition or resistance. It really had this tangible impact that affected the lives of our neighbors, of people who lived in our community. so that was that. And then I guess the second part of your question was, just sort of recognizing that, different people walked us to school every day, trying to explain who all these people were to our friends at Mount Royal Elementary School. And it just like took a long time. And that realizing that other people didn't really live like that. That happened pretty early too.
Thank you, Frida.
Yeah.
And again, it's an honor to be able to talk to someone with such rich history that you obviously have. So, being that you were around so many of these peacemakers and you come from a family of peacemakers, when did you first become aware of the work of Pax Christi?
Yeah, I think, it was sort of a punchline to a kind of story that was around our house when we were kids. Now I live in New London, Connecticut, which was the site in the 70s and 80s and even further back of a lot of anti-nuclear activity and big protests around the christening and commissioning of nuclear submarines. And my mom would tell this story of being here in this community at a launch of a sub and hearing a police officer over his walkie-talkie saying, "Oh yeah, we got some Pax Krispies here, and they're protesting." And so I think Pax Christi and your rich history first entered my brain as kind of this funny, Pax Crispy, like kind of a breakfast cereal kind of thing. But in all seriousness, I think we, as a teenager, as a young adult, really connected to, I guess, this my parents were so out there and so out of the mainstream. And so I think my first impression of Pax Christi was, well, people who own cardigans and suit jackets believe this stuff too. People who have jobs and go to church on Sunday, as opposed to, kind of painting houses occasionally to make a little money and having house church in our living room. Kind of normal people, everyday people believe what my parents and the Jonah House community believe, and enact it in a slightly less full on or kind of extreme way maybe, but I found it very validating and reassuring to really find the Pax Christi community and the different chapters around the country as a young adult, because it kind of meant that while my parents were sort of perhaps this radical edge or this fullest expression of kind of the pre-Constantinople Christianity, the early church, that there was a full spectrum of people who believed just as deeply and just as fully, and somehow managed to make that belief system integrate with mainstream American culture just a little bit more than Philip Berrigan and Liz McAlister did.
As the stories of your parents are fairly well known, I am interested in how you, as a child growing up, also experienced what your parents did. And could you describe, beyond what it was like growing up with radical activist parents, what it was like growing up with parents who were frequently in and out of jail for their nonviolent witness to the Gospels?
Yeah. Well, having parents who were in jail, kind of actually gave me more in common with some of my classmates in elementary school and high school, middle school, than you might think, because because the drug war took Baltimore, Maryland by storm, and many of my classmates had family members who were going in and out of prison, and so it helped me to be more empathetic and more just kind of alongside my classmates from an early age, and that experience of visiting a parent in prison or in jail is that's a really awful experience. It really is not built for human beings, right? It's prison and jail is not built for rehabilitation, even though that was the name of the prison my mom spent 2.5 years in. It's not built for correction. It really is built for oppression. It's built for abuse. It's built for kind of magnifying and replicating the trauma and the oppression that brought people, most people, to that carceral institution. So anyway, we tried really hard. My parents worked really, really hard to maintain their centrality in our lives, despite prison. We wrote a ton of letters back and forth. The people who lived in the Jonah House community at the different points when Phil and Liz were in prison worked extremely hard to help us maintain those relationships, and even continue to build them, not just kind of put them on life support, but continue to build them. I think it taught me that every child needs more than two parents, right? Like that needs a lot of caring, loving adults in their lives. That's a gift that my parents gave to me that every young person really deserves. And so, but it was very hard work, and I don't think I appreciated how hard it was until I was a parent myself. Like what they set to the side in order to try and be fully present to us. The fear, just the trauma of being in prison. This is more than you really want to hear, but later my sister, who's 7 years younger than I am, was working. We were both adults, and she's working in the East Bay, and she's kind of doing social work, and she's reading this book about trauma stewardship. And she's, really kind of feels this book a lot, and is sharing it with lots and lots of people. And she says, "Oh, Frida, you should read this book." And I said, "Well, I never really experienced trauma, And she's like, "Frida, our parents spent 11 years separated from one another and separated from us by prison. Like, of course you have trauma." And I was like, it was like the scales fell off my eyes in terms of thinking about that, just because they were there for the right reasons, just because they, on some level chose that, stepped out of the mainstream in order to resist in such a way that would bring them into conflict with the criminal, into connection with the criminal justice system. Just because they chose that didn't mean it wasn't really hard. So that's something I've been really, continuing to reflect on in my adult life. And so, yeah.
Thank you. So, Frida, being with all of your years of experience and you being observer to the beginning of a number of these movements and so forth, tell me, what are your hopes for the future of the Catholic peace movement? And in that future, where do you see Pax Christi fitting in?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. I mean, I think the future of the Catholic peace movement has got to be really, really robust and strong, and informed by ecumenicalism and and interfaith, but to really be able to drill down on the, on the core pillars of our faith and our 2,000-year tradition, not as an institution, but as kind of a Jesus movement, and to really put the works of mercy like right at the heart of that, seems really, really important. And I think the leadership of Pope Francis, has been really beautiful and inspiring. It's opened up, I guess, a new space for Catholics, and breathed new life into our institutional church, I think. But as Catholics, I think we need to, and I think Pax Christi can do a lot around this. I think we really need to be, I want to say something like, not about institution maintenance, but about like a real lived kind of solidarity and resistance and creation of new things, right, and of new relationships, because whether we're looking at climate catastrophe and our environment and the way in which humans negatively impact our environment, whether we're looking at the role of women within our church, whether we're looking at who loves whom and how a person loves another person, whether we're looking at the next generation and what is a child, and when does a collection of cells become a child. Like there's a lot that can divide us. There's a lot that can rip us apart, and yet Jesus really called us to the table. Like he called us to the table, and he asked us to break bread with him and be transformed by his sacrifice. Sorry, I don't know where that's coming from, but and there's something so essential and so human about that Eucharistic moment, and Pax Christi, I think, can really help us access that and be restored and made whole by that, and be motivated and called to sort of the highest possible expression of our faith, which really is taking care of our neighbor and addressing the violence that is so corroding our culture, and so cheapening like the lives that are, we are created in God's image, and how can that be so cheapened by capitalism or by a war-making nationalism or by racism? Like, how can we allow the lives of our brothers and sisters to be and God's people, wherever they fall on the gender continuum, how can we allow those lives to be cheapened? We really must not. And so I see the opportunity for something new and beautiful and powerful to emerge.
Frida, in your book, It Runs in the Family, You call youth rebellion a cliche, writing, quote, "People often wondered why the Berrigan kids never rebelled, never became Tea Party Republicans or Wall Street day traders. But we did not rebel at all." And I'm wondering, and I can hear the passion and the care in your voice on this, why you and your siblings have remained so dedicated to peace and social justice. What keeps you going?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think like a real love of people, right? And a love of the truth. I think that, and I'm not sure if I said this in the book, but like our parents never lied to us, like nobody ever said to little Frida or little Jerry or little Kate, it's all gonna just be fine. Like, don't worry about it. They really just did not varnish or gild the truth of nuclearism or militarism or racism. They did not protect us from how hard this world is. And at the same time, they really, really loved us, and the community that they created really, really kept us whole in a context that could have really, damaged us and hurt us. And so I think it's that, like, I think it's an acknowledgement of that, that community that they built, which, has really changed, right? It is not like what it was 48 years ago when I was born into it, right? It has not stayed the same, and yet it continues. And the same people who held me as an infant, continue to hold my family today, and that's a really beautiful thing, and have helped us, my sister and brother and I, reconcile with and rise to the challenge of our mom's dementia. They've helped us keep our dad's memory very much alive in the lives of our next generation, my 3 kids and my brother's 3 kids, and continue to honor the spirit of my uncles, Jerry and Daniel, and so I kind of feel like an obligation or responsibility, in the best sense of those words, to what they created, and I guess the last thing I'll say is, answer your very good questions with too many words, is the world doesn't get any better because we're sad or despairing or self-isolating. And so I think my brother and sister as well really look for those opportunities for connection. And there's nothing like connecting with other members of the human family over Eucharist and at picket lines and in meetings where we're asking the Holy Spirit to enter and to help us not be afraid as we do something that's hard, right? So.
And Isaac has the last question here.
Well said. As Pax Christi celebrates its 50th anniversary, Frida, do you have any message for the next generation of Catholic peacemakers?
Well, just that to be the next generation of Catholic peacemakers, right? Like that, like we need you. And there's room for you. There's a tradition here. There's a legacy, and it's the well to drink from, or one of the wells to drink from. But it's not a straitjacket or a recipe that one has to follow down to the gram, So there's space for you to improvise and embroider and bring your whole self, because we need everybody's whole selves, And you know, as I said earlier, you know, I'll be 50 in a couple years, like a year and a half, I guess. And so I am not a young person. I am not a member of the next generation. I'm sort of, yes, I'm middle-aged at this point. And so, you know, what Pax Christi needs for the next 50 years is you know, teenagers and young people, people in their 20s and 30s and early 40s, in addition to all of us who have lots of gray hair at this point. So, but I think there's a lot of good that we can do in the next 50 years.
Frida, you had mentioned that your mother is suffering from dementia, but do know that everyone at Pax Christi is praying for her, and we thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you. She's praying for all of you too. She really is. So yes.
And thank you for your time.
Yes. Oh, it was delightful to talk to all of you.